DC Comics have done a lot of things that I find indefensible, things that every once in a while, but not very often, I will say are fireable offenses. What I'm about to talk about today is, without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest blunder that they've made since I've had my channel talking about DC Comics full time. And this isn't something that should be suggested. Somebody or some people should be fired for the hiring that they just made on this new Red Hood book. We're talking about a writer. Just on the surface of it and what their agenda is, it is a trans activist writer. Probably shouldn't have been hired because of that. But then there are calls for violence, not like words or violence, like actual violence against a pretty well-known established Warner Brothers star, J.K. Rowling. This writer also came under fire for celebrating the death of 3,000 Americans as if that were a good thing. And it's absolutely shocking. Even with all the stupid things that DC Comics have done, this is about as shocked as I've ever been when I went back. I saw a new creator name. I was like, hey, who is that? I should probably check up on this. And then when you start Google searching, because this is all Google searchable, you're like, holy fuck. I cannot believe DC Comics, a subsidiary of Warner Brothers fucking Discovery, would hire this person with the history that they do have. Absolutely indefensible stuff on the part of DC Comics. They are once again shooting themselves in the dick. And I think you guys are going to be surprised on this one. DC Comics has officially announced Red Hood #1, a new ongoing mature rated series launching September 10th, 2025 as part of their DC All-In initiative. This book is rated for readers 17 and up and takes Jason Todd, aka the Red Hood, out of Gotham and drops him into New Angelique, a gritty fictional city inspired by New Orleans. The series is written by horror author and trans activist Gretchen Felker-Martin, with art by Jeff Spokes. Jason teams up with Huntress Helena Bardinelli as they chase a superpowered serial killer. And all that on the surface of it seems fine, and we'll get into the details of the story if you're still interested after I've given you some of the details on this creator. But this does happen a lot, especially with DC. A name, oftentimes female, shows up. You've never heard of them before in their life because they've never actually written a comic book in their life. You start doing some research and you're like, holy fuck balls, I can't believe they're doing this again. But this is a billion times worse. And it really sucks that they're doing this to Jason Todd. They've already destroyed some pretty marketable characters with what they've done to John Kent, the heir apparent to Superman, with what they've done to Tim Drake, another former Robin. Well, I guess he's currently still a Robin. I think he's back to Red Robin. And now what they're doing to Jason Todd Red Hood, a character that has, while certainly not as much marketability as Batman or probably even Dick Grayson, is right up there with a lot of the other B and C and D tier characters of DC Comics, and probably ahead of a lot of them. So it's just shocking stuff. When you get into it, we'll start with just the basic things of why Gretchen Felker-Martin probably never should have been hired. And then we'll get into the stuff that absolutely should have disqualified him from ever being hired and why people at DC Comics should be fired for this. Gretchen Felker-Martin, best known for the horror novels Manhunt and Cuckoo, has openly said that he writes primarily for queer audiences. In a past interview with Polyester Zine, he said, "My whole world is queer people. When I'm writing, it's for queers always." His work often centers around queer and trans characters navigating survival in brutal, oppressive worlds. Given that background, we can likely expect those themes to bleed into his take on Jason Todd's story as Red Hood. Now, does being a queer or trans writer automatically disqualify you from ever working on mainstream product? Absolutely not. There have been plenty of great trans creators in comic book history. There have been plenty of LGBTQ plus creators in comic book history that actually like superheroes and they want to tell awesome superhero stories, and that makes sense. You go out there and you get the right person for the right job, and you do it without any qualifiers on that. Being trans doesn't disqualify you from being a good writer. Being gay doesn't qualify you from being a good writer. But when you're somebody that's openly stated, and that was a direct quote, "My whole world is queer and I only write for a queer audience," that probably says you're not really mainstream. Somebody like DC or Marvel probably shouldn't be looking to hire you, because while you are aiming at an audience, your audience is such a small portion of their audience, it's just not a good fit. So that right there is a disqualifier if you're smart. if the editorial office at DC Comics is smart. That person is not going to be a good hire and a good fit for our audience. And they've been making this particular mistake over and over and over again, with the Jedzia Axelrods and things of that nature over at DC Comics. This is nothing new, but it is the same self-inflicted wound over and over again. But once you get past that part, the I only write stories for a queer audience part, which probably should business-wise disqualify you from writing mainstream characters, especially ones that aren't trans or queer, i.e. Jason Todd the Red Hood, and you start getting into some of the details and the things that this dude has actually championed in the past, and you start getting into some very, very dark territory that should have been the enormous red flag that said never in a fucking million years would I ever consider talking to this person, let alone hiring them, because I am associated with Warner Brothers Discovery, and one of the most well-known and profitable fucking IPs out there is Harry Potter. I shit you not, this is real. But Felker-Martin has also stirred major controversy online. In early 2023, he posted on Twitter that he wanted to slit the throats of J.K. Rowling and other authors he accused of being transphobic. This came just after he'd signed an open letter criticizing the New York Times coverage of transgender issues. His novel Manhunt also features a fictional scene where Rowling is killed in a fire, something Felker-Martin proudly highlighted on social media, and I guess was a selling point for the novel because there is a very small but very vocal community that absolutely despises J.K. Rowling. I think a lot of it has to do with J.K. Rowling's enormous amount of success, and that, you created the Harry Potter franchise, got all the movies out there, got rides, got video games, got all that kind of stuff, all the things that these people want, but also proudly stands up there for women's issues. And this writer, Gretchen Felker-Martin, went out there and openly on social media in front of everybody called for violence against J.K. Rowling, one of the biggest moneymakers for all of Warner Brothers Discovery. DC Comics is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers Discovery. They all work for David Zaslav. How is this shit getting through? Am I the only one that's fucking normal anymore? How can these type of hiring decisions be made? Why would, even if it wasn't J.K. Rowling, what if it was somebody else that wasn't associated with Warner Brothers Discovery? Why would you go out there and hire somebody that would go online in full public and call for the slitting of somebody's throat in public because they have a different perspective or a different point of view, or they don't like exactly what J.K. Rowling is championing? And yes, J.K. Rowling is a bit of a fire plug. She is not one to sit back and take the criticism lying down. She's always fighting back and all that kind of stuff. And I do personally agree with her. I think what J.K. Rowling is fighting for is great. I think that we should be fighting for women's rights. And there is definitely a major movement going on right now where people are trying to fringe on that and are trying to put women in a very bad position. J.K. Rowling is standing up, using her position to do that. And that's fine if you disagree with her. A lot of people do. And I have no problems with people having a disagreement with my personal opinion or J.K. Rowling's. I just don't get how incompetent a hiring staff and a management staff could be to actually overlook this. You can't overlook it. If you Google his name, this is the information that comes up. It's not exactly hidden. It's out there for the entire world to see. I didn't have to search very long to find all this information. And it actually kind of, maybe depending on how you want to look at it, gets worse. Later that year, November 2023, Felker-Martin came under fire again, this time for comments about 9/11. He called Osama bin Laden's terror attacks principled and defensible while referencing his so-called letter to America. He later deleted the post and apologized, but not before it drew heavy backlash, especially for a comment referring to the deaths of nearly 3,000 people. And that's the person that DC Comics wants to hire. That's the person that they're putting their money behind. That's the person that they're putting a major Batman character behind, is out there supporting and championing on Osama bin fucking Laden. Like, you cannot hate these companies enough. You cannot hate the editorial staff at DC enough. You cannot despise the leadership at DC enough. And they go out of their way to do this all the fucking time. And yet we're always forgiving them, right? I'm always forgiving them. I cover the comic book industry on a daily basis here. I see lots of stuff that I don't agree with, but I do try to champion the great stuff out there. But there's so much stuff Maybe not quite like this. I do think this is beyond the pale, if I'm being completely honest about what I'm covering here, that DC Comics would go out there and hire somebody that, number one, says, I don't write for a mainstream audience. I only write for a queer audience. Number two, called for violence against J.K. Rowling, the owner of one of the major properties at Warner Brothers Discovery, and then championed and lauded the efforts of Osama bin Laden on 9/11. These are the people that they're fucking hiring. We cannot despise them enough. The fact that they thought they would be able to get this through, that we wouldn't realize, that we wouldn't do a simple Google search where all this information is freely fucking available, and the ledger that everything Gretchen Felker-Martin has championed over the years. And that's only a couple of years. It's not like this person's been around for 15 years and had a couple of controversies. That's in 2 years. Absolutely indefensible on the part of DC Comics. There's no defending this. I don't think CB Cebulski would be fucking this stupid. I don't think the dude from fucking Minnesota would hire this person. It's absolutely crazy. Now, if you're still interested in the book, I guess I can tell you what it's all about. As for the book itself, Red Hood #1 is being billed as a gritty pop noir thriller. Jason Todd is tracking a telepathic serial killer who's been targeting police in New Angelique and getting wrapped up in a conspiracy involving mind control. DC describes the book as gritty, bloody, and sexy, with editor Ariana Turturro calling Jason's partnership with Huntress both intense and unstable. With a mature tone, graphic content, and high-profile covers, DC is clearly positioning this as a bold, violent reimagining of Red Hood's mission for justice. You can think whatever you want, and you can say whatever you want and have fun with all that stuff. But you don't have to work for DC Comics. You don't have to work in mainstream entertainment. You don't have to be rewarded for your awful behavior. And that's my take on that. I think for the most part, people should be able to say what they want to say. But once you start saying, I kind of like the Holocaust, yeah, I'm not going to hire you anymore. You can go do your fucking indie project. You can go crowdfund your horror book or whatever. But apparently DC just has no principles anymore. And I'm just shocked that nobody at Warner Brothers Discovery put up an objection that, hey, maybe we shouldn't be paying the person that would like to kill one of our enormous moneymakers and another human being that just happens to have a different point of view from them. Crazy stuff all around. If you appreciate this kind of coverage of comic books, real brutal honesty that you'll only get right here on Thinking Critical YouTube, and you'd like to support our efforts of bringing an honest perspective to comic books and a little bit of accountability, which they need now more than ever, obviously, and you'd like to support that mission, become part of the family, the place to do that is Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. There's a button right here, and I do hope to see you there very, very soon.